Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 212, Around the Whirlpool. The episode begins with Ash and the gang still on the ferry, on their way to the Whirl Islands, as they excitedly talk about what they expected to find there. With Misty still immensely excited, stating her want to capture a whole bunch of water Pokemon in the Whirl Islands. Ash butts in, though, and states how he was one step closer to becoming a Pokemon Master, showing off all of his badges, and bragging about his newest badge that he earned last episode, the Storm Badge, only for Misty to jump in and state that she didn't care that Ash was becoming a Pokemon Master, stating that she herself was going to become a Water Pokemon Master once she caught all of these water Pokemon, not just in the Whirl Islands, but in the ocean all over the world as well. Ash and the gang then look on to see a whirlpool appear in the distance, and aren't immediately frightened. However, more whirlpools soon form, each one larger than the last. These are enough to actually frighten Ash and the gang, obviously not wanting to get sucked in, and two deckhands on the ship, who were actually Jesse and James in disguises, see this distress and offer Ash and the gang some drinks to calm them down. These drinks don't do much though, so Jesse and James assure Ash and the gang that everything would be alright, explaining that the captain was a super experienced, knowledgeable guy, so he knew what he was doing, and the ship was also designed for incredible safety during situations like this. Ash and the gang had their doubts, but as they looked over the ship's railing, they saw that the ship was able to pass through the whirlpools without any damage, or any turbulence, much to their shock. Team Rocket then bragged to Ash and the gang how they were right this whole time, and that the ship was entirely fine, leading Meowth to pop out in between Jesse and James, and warn the two of them not to get too cocky, explaining that the ship may end up hitting a wave if they kept talking. Jesse and James immediately tried to hide Meowth, not wanting him to blow their cover, telling him to shut the fuck up. But Meowth wouldn't go away, so James feared that Ash and the gang would spot them at any moment, so he decided to take action right now and try and steal Pikachu with a net, while Ash was still leaning over the boat, looking at the whirlpools. However, Meowth's warning seemed to be right, as the ship does run into turbulence as it finishes crossing the whirlpools. And although it only caused a minor shake, this shake was enough to push Ash where Pikachu originally was, and push Pikachu farther away, meaning that James landed his net on Ash, capturing him as opposed to Pikachu. Ash freaks out, questioning who was doing this to him, and he then realizes that the only people that he knew who liked nets were Team Rocket, so he breaks free of the net very easily, since it obviously wasn't big enough to hold his whole body, and immediately accuses the attendants of being Team Rocket. Team Rocket admit they were caught, so they do their motto, this time still in their attendant disguises, with Meowth imitating Wobbuffet at the end of the motto, eager to finally introduce himself since he was forced to hide from Ash and the gang, since they couldn't get a disguise for him. Team Rocket then declared that they would capture Pikachu just as they were trying to do, stating that they would not give up super easily since they had worked so hard to disguise themselves as attendants and sneak onto the ferry. Adding that once they captured Pikachu, they planned to try and raid a whole bunch of the ferry's rooms to try and steal anything valuable, believing that this ferry was a luxurious cruise trip, when in reality it was just a random-ass ferry. Ash and the gang then try to flee from Team Rocket. Team Rocket then send out their Arbok and Weezing to attack Ash and the gang with their Poison Sting and Smog attacks. But Ash and the gang dodge, but fear that they wouldn't be able to dodge a second time, so Ash tells Pikachu to end the battle quickly with his usual Thunderbolt attack. However, as Pikachu gets off the Thunderbolt attack, Jesse orders Wobbuffet to use Mirror Coat, which deflects the Thunderbolt, creating a massive explosion as the Thunderbolt goes flying back towards Ash and the gang, although Team Rocket got caught in the explosion as well, since Wobbuffet wasn't strong enough to entirely deflect the Thunderbolt. As a result of the explosion, both Ash and the gang and Team Rocket go into the ocean, with Team Rocket blasting off and Ash and the gang landing just outside the ferry. Thankfully, Ash and the gang are able to not drown in the water and swim to the surface. Not the surface as in land, but surface as in getting their heads above water. Only to find out that the ship was continuing forward without them, not knowing that they had fallen off, and to make matters worse, they couldn't swim back, as they were being pulled in by the whirlpools that the ship had just came over. Ash and the gang then remembered, though, that they had water Pokemon that they could use to swim to safety by clinging onto their backs, so they stopped panicking as Misty sent out her Poliwhirl and Goldeen, and Ash sent out his Totodile, with Ash clinging onto Totodile, Brock clinging onto Poliwhirl, and Misty clinging onto Goldeen, as they swam back to catch up to the ship. It seemed as though they were outswimming the whirlpool, but unfortunately the whirlpool managed to catch up and captured Ash and the gang yet again. It seemed as though all hope was lost, as Ash and the gang were about to get sucked into the whirlpool and drown, when suddenly the whirlpool's current changed, which sent the whirlpool in the opposite direction, allowing Ash and the gang to escape. Ash and the gang questioned how this was possible, as they saw a strange silhouette swimming underneath them and crying out. Ash and the gang questioned what the silhouette could be before it suddenly disappears, leaving no trace of its existence aside from the fact that the whirlpools were now gone. Unfortunately, though, due to almost being sucked in by the whirlpools, Ash and the gang had lost sight of the ferry, meaning that they were now stranded in the water. Fortunately for them, though, a Pokemon then showed up, racing towards them and doing circles around them, which Brock recognizes as a Corsola. Misty questioned why the Corsola was doing circles, when it was then revealed that the Corsola was calling out for a Tentacruel to come help Ash and the gang, and sure enough, the Tentacruel then showed up, and picked Ash and the gang up with its tentacles, carrying them, with Corsola following after them. Due to Misty loving the Tentacruel, she was really enjoying being carried by its tentacles, although Ash and Brock were freaked out, as a normal person would be. However, even Ash and Brock began to get happy, as Ash and the gang spotted that the Tentacruel and the Corsola were leading them towards a boat. When they arrive at the boat, the Corsola immediately jumps onto the water to the man who was standing on the edge of the boat, revealing himself to be Professor Elm. Yeah, that's right, Professor Elm was back. Ash and the gang were relieved to see a familiar face, and request that Elm take them on board, and Elm happily obliges, wanting to respect his Corsola, knowing that it led them here. Although he was curious why Ash and the gang were about to drown in the water in the first place, so he decides to question them as he takes them into his boat, wrapping them in blankets and giving them tea to warm up. It's then that Ash and the gang explain that they were on a ferry to the Whirl Islands, when suddenly it got caught in whirlpools and they end up in the water as a result. This leads Elm to thank his Corsola and the Tentacruel, which were revealed to be his as well, for saving Ash and the gang, although he was initially mad at the Corsola and Tentacruel for escaping him, but now that anger was entirely gone after realizing why they had left. While Ash and the gang warmed up, they decided to talk to Elm some more, informing them of all the adventures they had had since they had left Newbark Town, including how Ash had managed to earn 5 gym badges up to this point. Elm congratulates Ash on his success, and was about to reveal why he was on the boat, when he suddenly noticed that Misty had taken a very severe liking to Corsola, not just because it saved them, but because she loved water Pokemon. So, he decides to explain his reasoning for being on the boat, and how he caught the Corsola at the same time, explaining that he was on the boat as he was also journeying to the Whirl Islands to do some research there, and adds that he had caught Corsola on one of the Whirl Islands that he had already visited. Even Ash and Brock became a bit intrigued by the Corsola, and Ash wanted to learn some more about it, so he used his Pokedex on it, only for Elm to stop him and simply tell Ash about Corsola himself, explaining all of its abilities and moves. After a few minutes of this explanation, Elm then goes into even more exposition as he talks about the captain of the boat, his acquaintance, who had agreed to help him with his research by driving the boat, named Captain Marius. As if on cue, Captain Marius then comes down from the cockpit and introduces himself to Ash and the gang, who introduce themselves back. He then quickly realizes that he shouldn't have been away from the cockpit, as the ship could end up steering into a whirlpool for all he knew, so he immediately rushes back up to the cockpit, but invites Ash and the gang and Elm to come along so that they can still talk. As Captain Marius drives, Ash and the gang essentially explain their entire life story, until Captain Marius reveals that they were getting close to the first of the Whirl Islands, being Blue Point Isle, which, he said, was named after a rock that navigates sailors to the island after they had a long journey where they almost got lost. Also clarifying that, despite this island being the first one, this was where he and Elm were currently heading for research. When the boat arrives at a port, Marius then explains that the largest city of the island was called Inland City, and that's where they were currently, as Inland City also served as the island's port, and was the biggest port in all of the Whirl Islands. As soon as Ash and the gang, Elm, and Marius departed off of the boat and began walking around the city, Misty stated her excitement to find some water Pokemon, while also pointing out how colorful the city looked, with all of its colorful flags and decorations. Upon hearing how Misty liked water Pokemon so much, Elm suggested that she enter the upcoming World Cup, with Marius jumping in and clarifying that the World Cup was why the city was so colorful with all the flags and decorations to begin with, since it was a way to prepare for the World Cup and attract people to it, even though the World Cup was held on a different island. Misty questioned why Elm thought she specifically should enter this World Cup, inquiring what it even was, with Elm revealing that it was a water battle tournament that was held every 3 years, where you could only use water Pokemon, and knowing that Misty loved water Pokemon, Elm thought that Misty would be the perfect competitor. Sure enough, Misty was extremely interested in entering this World Cup, as was Ash, as he reminded Elm that he had a water Pokemon as well, and he just wanted to battle anyone no matter what, so of course he was going to enter. Both Ash and Misty then demand Elm to direct them to the World Cup immediately, only for Elm to reveal that the World Cup actually wasn't starting for another month. But this didn't stop Misty and Ash from wanting to compete, so they decided to go to a Pokemon Center with Elm, Marius, and Brock to learn more information on the World Cup, and potentially gain an upper hand in it, with Elm revealing that you had to go to the center to register for the World Cup anyway, so it was definitely a smart idea to go there. Meanwhile, after blasting off, Team Rocket had washed up on the port of Inland City as well, and were of course exhausted and starving, deciding that they had to find something to eat instantly. However, as soon as they spotted Ash and the gang in the distance heading to the Pokemon Center, they decided that eating could wait, and they had to try and steal Ash and the gang's Pokemon first. Although they were extremely hungry, so they couldn't even plan anything properly, so they decided that maybe they should just go get some lunch first. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang, they had arrived at the Pokemon Center and immediately started talking to Nurse Joy, who registered them for the World Cup, and gave them a guidebook, which explained all of the rules of the World Cup. Nurse Joy then began to walk at Ash and the gang through the guidebook to explain any confusion, only for Brock to interrupt Nurse Joy's explanation to try and flirt with her, stating that the book about the World Cup was boring, and they should instead be reading a biography about Nurse Joy, insinuating that her life was super interesting. It seemed as though Corsola found the World Cup explanation boring as well, as it then hopped out of Professor Elm's arms and went off to a swimming pool in the backyard of the Pokemon Center. Misty warns Elm of this, worried that Corsola would get lost, but Elm assures her that Corsola just loved going in pools and hanging out with all the other water Pokemon who happened to be also chilling in the pool. Misty questions how all of these water Pokemon were Corsola's friends when it seemed as though they had just met, leading Elm to clarify that he had found out that this Pokemon Center's pool was connected to the sea, so a lot of the Pokemon who were in the pool had actually just swam in from the sea, where Corsola used to live, so it already knew a lot of them. Hearing this, Misty decides to go over to the pool herself and admires the Corsola, watching it play with all of its friends. Misty is soon called back into the Pokemon Center by Elm, who informs her that Nurse Joy had officially just finished registering Ash and Misty for the World Cup. Yay! Marius overhears what Elm just said and questions why Brock didn't register for the World Cup, leading Brock to explain that he was more interested in learning about Pokemon rather than battling with them, specifying that he wanted to be a breeder. To demonstrate what he meant by understanding Pokemon, Brock then goes up to a trainer who had a Marill and asks him some questions while taking notes, explaining that that was his job as a breeder, to learn about Pokemon from other people and other experiences. The trainer then reveals to him that water Pokemon keep their health in check by staying moist, and therefore that's why they always like to be in water all the time. Being intrigued by Brock's dream, Ash and Misty get questioned by Marius on what their dreams were, with Misty revealing that she wanted to be a water Pokemon expert, and Ash clarifying that he wanted to be a Pokemon master. This leads Elm to come up and remind Misty that the Whirl Islands were the perfect place for her to further her goal of being a water Pokemon expert, since the Whirl Islands were famous for their water Pokemon, with many trainers specializing in them, clarifying that the entire purpose of the World Cup was to honor the water Pokemon and improve their skills. Knowing that there would be a whole bunch of other Whirl Island trainers with water Pokemon in the World Cup, Ash began to get worried, as he only had one water Pokemon and didn't specialize in water Pokemon like his competition would. Misty, on the other hand, was very confident about winning, knowing that she was likely better than a lot of those other water-type trainer losers, stating that she was going to win the cup in order to prove to not only all the other water trainers that she was superior and a true water Pokemon expert, but also to prove to her sisters that she was more experienced than them with her water Pokemon. Seeing Misty's determination, Ash got a little more determined and decided that he shouldn't waste his time being worried, and demands to know the location of the World Cup exactly, remembering that it wasn't on this island. This leads Elm to point to a map of the Whirl Islands in the Pokemon Center, specifically pointing to Red Rock Island, which was located between Silver Rock and Yellow Rock Island, the other two Whirl Islands, specifying that Red Rock Island would be the location of the main World Cup, but in order to compete in the World Cup, much like the Orange League, you had to compete in several other challenges before you actually attended the Cup. Specifically, 1 or 2 challenges on each of the other islands, being Yellow Rock Island and Silver Rock Island, confirming that there were 4 islands total. Elm then revealed that if a trainer was able to pass all of the challenges on all of the islands, as well as win the actual cup, then they would be given the title of Water Pokemon Alpha Omega, one of the best water Pokemon trainers of all time. Since any trainer who was able to win the World Cup and pass all the challenges would obviously know water Pokemon very well by that point. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was both spying on Ash and the gang and listening in on their conversation through a listening device, and they heard about all of the strong water Pokemon that would be participating in the World Cup, and decided to try and trail Ash and the gang along their journey through the Whirl Islands in an attempt to capture all the water Pokemon that they would encounter, as well as any Pokemon owned by the other participants. After all this, Elm was helping Marius tune up the boat as they were preparing to head out yet again, as Elm had suggested that he, Ash and the gang, and Marius go to the closest island, which was very nearby, to begin the World Cup challenges. Ash and the gang agreed with Elm's suggestion, and as soon as the boat was ready, everyone got back inside and began to take off for the closest of the islands. It's on the boat that Ash and the gang mentioned to Elm and Marius the mysterious creature that they had spotted before that was able to change the current. Marius reveals, unsurprised at what Ash and the gang had just said, that he had heard several rumors about a mysterious creature, which made sense as the Whirl Islands were known for their mysterious creatures. Elm counters that it wasn't just the Whirl Islands that were known for mysterious creatures, stating that the entire Pokemon world was full of mysteries, using the new steel type that was recently discovered as an example. Also stating his belief that this mysterious creature that Ash and the gang saw could have been a steel type that was undiscovered, since the steel type itself was just discovered so recently, so it could be very possible that not every single steel type was discovered. Further clarifying that really the only steel type absolutely confirmed so far was Scizor, along with a few others. Elm then also reveals that the reason why he felt the need to currently investigate the ocean and the Whirl Islands was because the ocean was thought to be the origin of all life, so he figured that he could potentially find some new Pokemon in the ocean, so he was excited when Ash and the gang mentioned that they saw a mysterious creature. Marius then adds that although life started in the ocean, it obviously grew and expanded to other places as well, saying that Ash and the gang should also grow and expand just like life did in order to successfully reach their dreams. Ash and the gang were getting tired of all of this motivational talk and all this explanation, and they simply just wanted to enjoy the boat ride on the way to the island. So Elm and Marius finally permitted them to just relax and stop listening to their ramblings. However, they couldn't relax for long, as Team Rocket then showed up in their Meowth balloon. Elm was the first one to spot the balloon, and he questioned who it belonged to, as he wasn't used to seeing Team Rocket all the time. But when Ash and the gang were alerted to it, they instantly recognized it as Team Rocket's, and told Marius to turn the boat back towards the Pokemon Center, as they saw the balloon heading there. Sure enough, the balloon headed to the Pokemon Center, and released a net to capture all of the Pokemon inside the Pokemon Center's pool, as Team Rocket had decided that that would be the best way to capture a lot of the Pokemon on Whirl Islands, since the pool connected out to the sea, so a lot of Pokemon from the sea were in the center. As Nurse Joy watched on from the Pokemon Center in panic, Team Rocket celebrated the fact that they were able to capture the water Pokemon with no issues. However, their celebration was soon interrupted, as Marius had listened to Ash and the gang and turned the boat back, and now the boat was heading straight towards the Meowth balloon. Jessie sent out her Arbok to swim toward the boat and intercept it, leaving Ash to try and send out his Pikachu to use Thundershock on Arbok, but Misty stopped him, and instead sent out her Staryu, claiming that she wanted some practice before the World Cup. Arbok set its sights on Staryu, swimming towards it, but Staryu was able to hit it first, using a Swift. Staryu tried to follow up with a water gun, however, Arbok managed to dodge it and use a Poison Sting, which managed to severely injure Staryu, forcing Misty to recall it into her Pokeball, hoping that it would heal Staryu's poison, which was inflicted from a Poison Sting. Misty then tries to send out her second Pokemon, likely her Poliwhirl, but before she could, Psyduck then forcibly popped out, wanting to help. However, despite Psyduck's best intentions, when it bravely jumped into the water, facing its fears so that it could battle Arbok, it immediately began to sink, since it obviously couldn't swim, so Misty recalled it into its Pokeball, not even congratulating it for at least trying. Fucking bitch. Psyduck was at least trying to help. Seeing Misty have to recall two of her Pokemon, Ash didn't fucking care anymore. He was gonna battle whether Misty liked it or not. And with Misty not having sent in another Pokemon yet, he gets his chance, as he tells Pikachu to use Thunderbolt. However, right before Pikachu can get it off, James uses a cannon to fire a net, and it captures Pikachu. James then pulls in the net with a lever on the cannon, attaching Pikachu's net to the bottom of the Meowth balloon, which now had engines on the bottom of it. Ash and Misty both panic, although Ash tried to send in another Pokemon to save Pikachu, but before he could, Corsola already had that idea, as it jumped out of Elm's arms, wanting to save Pikachu, absolutely enraged at Team Rocket for trying to hurt it. Since it had saved Pikachu from the whirlpool, so now it was protective of it. Elm saw this, and decided to help his Corsola attack Team Rocket by commanding Corsola to use Tackle. However, before Corsola could do so, James sent out his Weezing, and had it use Sludge. Fortunately though, the Sludge missed, as Corsola was able to dodge it. Weezing then tried Sludge multiple more times, but Corsola was able to dodge all these as well. Arbok was getting fed up by Weezing's uselessness, so it decided to take matters into its own hands and tried to tackle Corsola, but Corsola came up to Arbok and tackled it first, sending Arbok flying back into the Meowth balloon. It also hits Weezing in the process, knocking Weezing into the balloon as well. Elm then instructs Corsola to use its most powerful attack, Spike Cannon, and Corsola does so as it jumps up out of the water and fires many spikes at Team Rocket's Meowth balloon and the nets, cutting the nets and freeing Pikachu and all the water Pokemon, as well as destroying the Meowth balloon, sending Team Rocket blasting off. Elm was immensely surprised by Corsola's power. Sure, he knew that Spike Cannon was Corsola's most powerful attack, but he didn't know it was that fucking powerful, so he joked that he would make sure to stay on Corsola's good side, as to not piss it off, and have himself used as Corsola's training dummy. Though Elm was somewhat intimidated by the Corsola, Misty was now just even more enamored by it, wanting to catch one of her own, knowing that she couldn't take Elm's, even though she very much wanted to. Ash and the gang then accompanied all the swimming Pokemon back into the Pokemon Center pool, as Misty continued to rant about how much she wanted to catch a goddamn Corsola. As it was getting late, Ash and the gang decided to stay overnight at the Pokemon Center, and Ash took the opportunity to call Professor Oak on the computer to tell him about the Whirl Islands and the mysterious creature that they had encountered that stopped the whirlpools. However, when Elm hears Ash mention the mysterious Pokemon, he immediately comes up to the computer and spots him talking to Oak and takes over the conversation, talking to Oak about all the theories he had regarding the mysterious Pokemon, wanting Oak to respect his research since Oak was his mentor. Eventually, the conversation trails off into talking about some completely unrelated theories, and Ash realizes that he would not get to talk to Professor Oak anymore. The next day, when everyone wakes up at the Pokemon Center, after being inspired by his conversation with Oak, Professor Elm declared that he now had somewhere else to be, so he couldn't take Ash and the gang to the closest island, which he revealed was Yellow Rock Island. Ash and the gang were disappointed by this, leaving Marius to jump in and state that there was still a ferry that could take Ash and the gang to Yellow Rock Island, although it was located in the nearby town on this island of Bluefin Land, so they would have to go there first. Ash and the gang realized that this was their only option, so Brock looks in his guidebook for a map of the island and eventually finds out where Bluefin Land was, and Ash and the gang head there as they say goodbye to Professor Elm and Marius.